After a 4-year run on The Amazing Spider-Man, Steve Ditko leaves the book in August of 1966, ending one of the most legendary runs in the character's history. Whoever is to follow that kind of a run has a Herculean task ahead of him. At the time, people might have even said an impossible task. But someone has to do it. How did they do? Well, let's take a look at the last year of Steve Ditko's run on a character he created, and let's see if the next run is able to live up to the legendary Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko's final year began with two of his most famous issues, Man on a Rampage and Final Chapter. Both I covered in last video. I'm starting this video in March because that's when The Amazing Spider-Man the book started. So the first 3 issues are actually issue 34, Thrill of the Hunt, featuring Kraven's return after 18-issue absence, issue 35, Mold Man Regrets, and issue 36, When Falls the Meteor, featuring a brand new villain, a pretty obscure villain at that, the Looter. Yeah, I bet you don't recognize that one, huh? Now, all 3 issues are fun and worth reading. If This Be My Destiny was an intense and emotional storyline right before this. Peter broke up with Betty Brant, Aunt May was in the hospital after getting sick, everyone in college hates Peter for being closed off, and Goblin is out there ready to cause mischief. These 3 issues slow things down. There's no great danger to Peter's family, nor is there much character development for, well, anyone. These issues are much more focused on the plot and the villains, the Looter being the standout. Kraven's doing what you'd expect. He wrestles with a lion and then hunts Spider-Man. Kraven's cool, but it's a pretty standard Kraven storyline. Molten Man's whatever. I just want to point out about Molten Man is that this guy rips off his shirt at the first sign of danger, and that is really funny to me. You go, man. Don't let them shame you. What I want to focus on is the Looter. This guy finds a meteor, and the rock gives him super strength. It's reminiscent of how many modern storylines handle the symbiote, it being a random meteor that gives out powers, something like in Spider-Man 3 or Insomniac Spider-Man 2. Looter's design is pretty badass. The suit he's rocking has that Ditko flair. I could absolutely see this character appearing in a movie or a cartoon or a video game nowadays, and I think his design would fit right in with everybody else. My favorite part of him, though, is specifically his personality. Now, he's another egotistical villain akin to Doc Ock, Goblin, Tinker, and so on. But I don't care. This guy is fun. My favorite moment comes towards the climax. Looter is running away, and he pops out a balloon like it's Metal Gear Solid 5, and then he just flies away with his balloon, and he yells out, "Farewell, fool! You were beaten by a superior intellect." It's just amazing. It's hilarious to read. It's amazing. In these issues, Peter's character is moping around over Betty, but what's interesting about Peter is his reaction and how it's changed from what he used to be. Here's a scene from Peter moping around early on in the books. He's wondering if he even should be Spider-Man. Here he straight up quits. Here he also quits. Now let's look at the reaction here. Peter Parker is Spider-Man until his dying breath. That's good character development, baby. It might not seem like much, but I eat up any sign of growth from Peter. He's accepted his role by this point, and by college, he has become the hero we know him today as. It's been a beautiful arc, and it's happened very naturally over the course of Ditko's run on the book. We don't see much of Flash or Harry. Gwen is the main supporting cast member in these few issues. She's trying to get Peter's attention, and because she's attracted to Peter despite him being distant, Gwen Stacy here is deep in the enemies to lovers trope, or maybe rivals to lovers. I don't know. I don't follow Tumblr, but the point is she doesn't like Peter. There's some misunderstandings, and over time, Peter and Gwen will grow closer, and they will eventually fall in love. These issues, she still doesn't really like Peter, so we're at that point, but you can kind of see how it goes. It's pretty standard. Now we get to the final 2 issues of Steve Ditko's run, starting with issue 37. Once upon a time, there was a robot. The cover and title might not sound that important. You might even think this must be a filler issue or not important, but no. This issue is actually really big. This is the first issue to introduce Norman Osborn as a proper character. And most importantly, we see Green Goblin's mystery begin to unravel. The main villain in this issue is Dr. Strom. He wants revenge on Norman Osborn because he screwed Strom over in the past, stole his work and sent him to jail to get rid of him. Strom then builds some robots to kill Norman, and that's the storyline essentially where we catch up. And we get to see Norman Osborn in action in this issue. We learn a few things about Norman in this issue. We learn that 1, Norman is ruthless. 2, Norman's cunning. 3, when attacked, Norman leaps into action no problem. He seems to be experienced in action and violence. 4, he attacks Spider-Man and straight up murders Strom at the end. He has no quarrels with any kind of stuff like that. 5, Norman is filthy rich. 6, Norman has had a bit of a personality shift over the last few years. 7, the explanation for all these traits and all the entire character of Norman Osborn is still left a bit of a mystery. I wonder what all this could mean. The Strom storyline has been adapted a few times now. Strom himself doesn't make appearances really in anything, at least as far as I don't remember ever seeing him anything. But Norman has cheated over a partner a few times in different versions. He does so in Spectacular Spider-Man with Otto Octavius. He does it in Insomniac Spider-Man with Otto Octavius. And I haven't read it in a few years, but I think he also did it in Ultimate Spider-Man with Otto Octavius. Yeah, the mad scientist role is given to a more important character in future versions, but the origin to that Norman screws over his partner lies in here. Issue 37 with Dr. Strom. Fun fact, I believe this is the very first case of someone yelling out Spider-Man with a special font. That's pretty cool. So that's a big issue when it comes to Norman Osborn, a very important character and a lot of people's favorite character still to this day. But the next issue, 38, is titled Just a Guy Named Joe. Like, this is it. This is Steve Ditko's final issue. Just a Guy Named Joe. Joe Smith is a bit of a loser. He tries to be a boxer, but he fails at it. He tries wrestling, but he fails at it. Then he tries acting, and what do you know? He fails at it. There's an accident during some scene he's shooting that gives him super strength, but there's also a catch. He will get uncontrollably angry. I don't know, like the Hulk or something. And then he goes on a bit of a rampage and he can't control himself. This Joe Smith is one of the only sympathetic villains of Steve Ditko's run, next to someone like the Lizard. I can't think of anybody else right now, but maybe there was another one. But it does make him quite different. I want to use this issue specifically to take one last look at Ditko's Spider-Man. I want to make a dedicated video to summing up my thoughts on Ditko and kind of explore in detail his evolution and dedicate an entire video on Ditko, so I'll save some of my thoughts there. I'm just going to point out a few things I noticed from the last batch of issues. These last batch of issues are some of Ditko's best art. Steve Ditko has always been really good at portraying motion and energy and Spider-Man's acrobatics, but these scenes are getting bigger and wilder. You know, here's a scene where Kraven will straddle Spider-Man in midair, just like your mom. His fight scenes aren't just flashier in choreography. He uses onomatopoeia, which is these words, these depicting sounds and effects, and it's used to a greater effect than before. Before there would be a dialogue in very much every single panel that had action in it, and in every single panel that didn't have action in it either. They were very keen on dialogue and exposition. There would be just straight up narration boxes that explains what happens as it's happening. But now, there are scenes where there's no dialogue at all, just Spider-Man punching people. The art carries the meaning, plus some sound effects. It's used to a great effect here. It really elevates some of these scenes. It's great stuff. Fun fact, this issue, 38, is the one with the protesters. If you don't know, you don't want to know. One of Ditko's weaknesses as a storyteller has been his contrivances, or maybe it's them. I don't know who to blame for everything, so I shall point my finger at Ditko because I'm talking about him. Joe Smith is a sympathetic guy in these issues. who only becomes a villain because of the accident that made him Hulk out. He has no control over himself. Spider-Man's obstacle here isn't really physical. It's not about beating up Joe, but it's about helping him. Fighting a man without hurting him is quite a compelling challenge. But the storyline doesn't really play into it. Spider-Man is fighting Joe like he would any other villain. Then at the end, the chemical fumes just kind of wear off and Joe returns to normal, without Spider-Man needing to do anything. It would be more compelling if Spider-Man had to do something to turn Joe back to normal without hurting him, like Spider-Man had to do with the Lizard. It's just kind of an inferior take on that fight. The same thing happens elsewhere with Ditko storytelling, where for example in 34 with Kraven, getting into their fight, and some thugs happen to see this fight, so they just kind of join in. I love the dynamic third partying. It adds some fun to the fight and makes it different and a little bit more hectic, and I feel like that adds to the scene quite a bit. But the reasoning for it lacks purpose. It just kind of happens because they just happen to see Spider-Man instead of, there being a real plot reason. It's not a character reason or a plot reason. It just relies on a coincidence. And I just think that's a little weak. Despite that, Ditko storytelling has its high points. I don't want to come across like I don't like the guy. The characters have nuance to them. For example, Peter lashes out here and claims to hate Ned Leeds. It's because of their love triangle. That's why he's mad at Leeds. Immediately afterwards, in the same exact scene, Peter admits that he doesn't really hate Ned. Peter's just hurt he can't be with Betty. It's a wonderful depiction of heartbreak. It's very human. Ditko characters have always been human from the start, and his depiction of flawed yet relatable people has only gotten better. I will admit some characters lack depth, mainly Liz and Betty, but even Aunt May, I feel, is underrepresented, as I spoke in the last video. Jameson has a moment or two where we get to see a little bit more substance to him, but mostly he's just a hater and caricature and nothing more. Peter pretty much gets all the focus. He's the thing that holds it all together. There's a spark of humanity to everybody, admittedly to a varying degree, but that spark is what makes the book work. It's the best part of his run, and it is what allows Spider-Man as a book and as a character to last for such a long time. You can criticize Ditko, Lord knows I do, but in the end, it's enough. I read through all these issues, and I enjoyed it. And to be able to do that like 70 years after you wrote your stories, that is an accomplishment. And with that, 38 issues behind him, Steve Ditko leaves The Amazing Spider-Man and a new artist takes over, John Romita Sr. We move on to the next issue, issue 39, How Green Was My Goblin? What is that title? In this issue, the writer has changed, and despite Ditko being credited as the artist and later on as a plotter, Ditko did a lot of the writing for his run, so Ditko's absence is really felt here. First of all, the new issue begins with the first half being nothing but the characters apologizing to each other. Peter makes peace with Harry, Gwen is nicer to Peter, and she even looks less grumpy. Ned Leeds and Peter make up. Everyone is just noticeably calmer and more level-headed. Ditko wrote everyone like they were ready to get super angry super quickly. There was a lot bubbling there. People have struggled to control their emotions, but here, everyone's acting just way more rationally. It's a massive difference, very noticeable. Everyone's just talking things through. It's a noticeable shift, but luckily it's not too jarring. I think the character's development has been leaning towards calmer and more level-headed characters for a while now. Peter lacks his usual anger, but at this point it's like, yeah, it's earned. It doesn't feel like a mischaracterization. It feels like, yeah, he's older, so he's wiser. Harry and Gwen getting slightly closer to Peter feels nice. And it makes them feel like real human beings who don't just hate Peter forever because of misunderstanding. It's really good writing. It's really nice. I don't know what else to say. It just feels really nice to see. Ditko is a legendary artist. I really love Ditko's art, especially the later art. Living up to someone like Ditko is unfair, and it's an unfair task. But despite Ditko's shadow, Romita manages to take over the book and live up to his predecessor, and then some. I'm not gonna judge if Romita is better than Ditko just yet, But I do think already in his first issues, Romita proves himself to be a worthy successor. Romita's art feels more down to earth and plain than Steve Ditko's. Steve Ditko's art style felt more inspired by cartoons. Like the faces were over-exaggerated and his characters didn't feel like they were imitating real life, but they were trying to capture some essence of it and then, stylistically kind of play off of that. It was a stylistic simplification, a cartoon of reality. Romita itself is just capturing things as they are. Like here's Ditko's Jonah looking grotesque and mean, and here's Romita's take on essentially the same thing. Romita's art is just more realistic. Not saying it's better, but it is different. It changes fundamentally how these stories feel. They feel more grounded in Romita's art. Just look at how straight everyone stands. Ditko's characters had movement, and their hands would move to emphasize what they're saying. Ditko's art felt similar to something like Archie comics or Donald Duck comics. It made his comedy shine. And here, Romita doesn't really do that anymore. It's too realistic for that. The grounded nature of the art puts emphasis on the real side of the characters. It's drawing out nuances in the character writing. There's some great storytelling. For example, here's Romita uses shadows to showcase Harry's worry over his dad. So, dark thoughts, strong shadows. JJJ was a big source of physical comedy during Ditko's run, and here, his expressions can be a little funny. They're not as big, and thus they're less funny. But by sacrificing comedy, you gain realism. You gain drama. Romita's action poses are less awkward than Ditko's. Just compare these two panels. Like Spider-Man is doing some silly attack and somehow Romita makes it look fluid, while Ditko seemed to be fine with things looking funny. He was okay if you laughed at something. I also just want to point out that Romita's paneling seems to be more varied than Ditko's. Ditko followed a strict 9-panel grid or 2x3 grid sometimes, but he was pretty strict. He kind of tended to keep to a standardized size of a panel. Sometimes he would go bigger, but those were a lot more rare. But here, Romita is much more aggressive. He's constantly changing the size of the panels and stretching panels and making wider panels, and its pages vary in their structure a lot more. I personally prefer the way Romita's panels flow. They just feel better to me. I want to talk about the writing in this run a little bit. So, I'm going to go over issue 39. The issue begins with Goblin creating a fake robbery. And, Spider-Man goes in and stops the robbery, and he gets gassed during the robbery. And this is all a trap. That gas disables Spider-Man's spider sense. So, when Spider-Man goes home and changes from Spider-Man outfit to regular Peter Parker, he doesn't sense that Goblin is watching him. So, with his plans, Goblin finds out who Peter is. It's pretty smart plan. Like, compare that to, just his first appearance, where it's really silly, like, Goblin, lures Peter to join in on, a movie production, and then he tries to murder Peter during the production, but it's just so much sillier, and it's just so much goofier, but here, it's, genuinely kind of smart. I don't really have complaints. I'll accept this. This is completely acceptable comic book logic to me. Peter, by this point, is also an arrogant character, as we've seen, so him not watching his back as closely as he should feels justified. I'm fine with it. Then Goblin confronts Peter. He follows Peter around, and then when Peter gets home, Goblin confronts him. Peter doesn't have his costumes or his web shooters, and he is super close to Aunt May. And it makes the scene feel really intense. It feels like Goblin has violated some sacred rule or something. Peter has messed up big time, and now the consequences are knocking at his door. This entire issue is great at building dread for the inevitable confrontation, and when it arrives, it's honestly kind of scary. Goblin is an absolute menace here. Unlike his previous plans, this one is genuinely smart, and he feels meaner. And the entire issue, at first, it tells you that Goblin is planning on something. So when the robbery happens, you're wondering, what's going on? There's something up. And then the issue reveals what Goblin has done. And it's just an issue where we follow Peter around. It's there's not that much action. Throughout, it's just watching Goblin stalk his prey, and it's such a great source of tension. It's excellent. And then, Goblin wins the fight, and Peter is taken to a secret hideout where Goblin reveals himself, unmasks himself to reveal Norman Osborn. The man who fit all the clues and was the most obvious candidate for Goblin? What? Have you ever wondered why is the Green Goblin green? In issue 40, we get our answer. Spider-Man is kidnapped by the Goblin, and Goblin's identity is for the first time revealed to be Norman Osborn. He monologues Spider-Man and his backstory. He was a businessman who was funding some shady science experiments. One day, he tries to mess with some chemicals and it explodes on him. His brain becomes damaged and his personality changes. He becomes angry and more power-hungry. He gains ambitions to become the greatest mass villain of all time. So then, he creates a mask for himself, and then he explains explicitly the color choice himself. I'll make the rest of the costume my favorite color, green. So Goblin is green because his favorite color is green. Ingenious writing. That's that good shit. Spider-Man manages to free himself from the Goblin and they fight. It's pretty epic, not gonna lie. Spider-Man knocks Goblin into some electric wiring, he gets shocked, and somehow he doesn't straight up die like a human being, but, Goblin loses his memories. So Spider-Man, feeling bad for Harry, decides to hide Norman's Goblinisms, and both walk away alive. This issue ends with both of them with their closest loved ones. If you ever wonder why Norman has memory issues in something like a life story, this is why. This is where it comes from. It's how the original, not the first confrontation, but like the fifth confrontation went. These two issues are excellent, some of the best so far, and they've had a massive influence over Norman and Peter over the years. But despite how much I love these two issues, I can't help but to wonder what Ditko's take would have looked like. Ditko created the character of Spider-Man and Goblin, and it just feels kind of wrong for someone else to come and do this story. Like, this Romita does this story really well, but it still rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But, I guess that's just how it goes sometimes. Issue 41, The Horns of the Rhino. A new era begins. I mean, I thought the beginning of college or Romita's first issue would be the start of a new era, but okay, whatever you say, Stan. The reason why this is this new era, the start of a new era, I think is because the last two issues maybe might have been plotted by Ditko or something. Because here, Romita does a lot of work to create his status quo. Last issue was just dedicated to, Ditko stuff, but here it's genuine changes, massive changes. The issue begins with Anna Watson, Aunt May's neighbor, who's thinking to herself what a wimp Peter is. And it kind of, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant here. It kind of sucks to see her be so mean to Peter. Like, Anna should be hyper aware about how much Peter has done for May. Like, she talks to May constantly. Peter didn't have parents. He lost his uncle. He's been bullied. Like, Flash literally tries to beat up Peter multiple times. Although, granted, I don't know if Aunt May's aware of that. This guy is getting chased to the streets. How can you look at a kid like that and think less of him? And, especially when he's so loyal to Aunt May. You're looking at him being like a pussy whip. What is wrong with you? What is that? That's so unfair. I understand Gwen's judgments, for example. Peter was rude to her and a coward in her eyes. Completely fair to look at it, Peter, and be like, yeah, you're kind of pathetic. But she doesn't know about Peter's life. Same with Harry. Harry even admits that he didn't realize that Peter is an orphan and that Peter might have some things going on with him. Harry recognizes error of his ways. They get a pass, but Anna should be aware. So, what the fuck? That. Anyway, then we go to Jameson, who rants about Spider-Man and takes shots even at Peter. And, that's just Jameson being Jameson. He is, Jameson. Then we go to college, where there's a lot of mean things being said, and Peter just kind of smiles at it all off. There's no anger, especially considering this is Peter Parker's. That's kind of big. Betty ends here as they meet up in this issue, and there's no spark of romance between them. Peter just admits that they're not compatible and moves on. Good for him. He spent like the last few issues crying over her, so it's really nice to see. And again, it feels like Ditko's loose ends are almost being tied up here. And, it's like, that's nice. Like, one of the worst parts of Spider-Man has been left behind. Love it. And then, there's this scene where Peter is really excited over buying a motorbike. And I don't know, this is just adorable. I mean, look at him go. Whee! Then he meets Gwen. He gets excited over Gwen. Like, he becomes very excited over Gwen. And he begins to flirt with Gwen. And Gwen seems to be into it. My boy is winning in life, despite so many people being so terrible. Even has this cute encounter with May at the end. There isn't that much that happens, but it feels nice to see Peter just kind of be happy. Like the boy deserves happiness, and seeing him like this is great. And this confidence he has, despite everybody looking down upon him, it feels like a message about it feels like a new era has come forward. Like Flash and Anna and like James, they don't know about the new Peter, and it feels like it's a new him. It ties that new shift of writers into the character development. I think that's really good, especially when the worst parts like Betty's being left behind cold. Like, there's no build up to it. It's just like, yeah, I don't care about you anymore. And I don't need more. I'm happy. Leave her behind. We're building a new status quo, and all the pieces are slowly getting there. And I think these 3 issues right now, this is a 3-arc storyline, really are about building that new era. The art is different, but since Spider-Man is famous for being a grounded character, the grounded art style, it fits here. It works. It brings out the best in these storylines. One thing that I like about Romita's character is it's not just more grounded. It feels like Romita uses this as an excuse to add more nuance and more complexity. These issues get into more complex topics, like these characters are actively talking about the Cold War, because this was, 60s. So, Soviets are, part of this, and like all this espionage thing, it's a sign of the times. And I don't know, that's something that really wasn't there before. And Peter, and even someone like JJJ, like he's again still Jameson. He does exactly what you think he does, but he has this moment, and it just adds a little bit of nuance to him. Seeing him his values, not just value of hating Spider-Man, but his value of law and order and all of this stuff. It's that little scene from Ditko's run coming back around a little bit, and I like that. Seeing that humanity, it counts, and I hope we see more of that as we go on. Issue 42 happens to be the first introduction of Mary Jane Watson. She appears in literally the final panel and says her iconic line. Now, for issue 43, we get to spend time with MJ, and this is the first time we get to know her, and oh boy, does she make a splash. So far, all the new characters have disliked Peter at their first encounter. MJ is different. Here, they hit off instantly. They have great chemistry, and they both like each other. Like, Peter is like almost literally drooling after her, and it's great. It's really cute. And MJ even likes Spider-Man. He makes this comment, and it's, it feels really good. MJ is awesome. I love MJ. She's just such a spark of life. She's just such a fun character. I love her dialogue and her interactions with everybody. Yeah, and in the end, Peter has to call off a date with her, and she's cool with it. Everybody else got mad, but MJ is like, yeah, cool, I get it, and that's that. She's fun, she's dancing, she's smiling all the time, just enjoying whatever is happening. After all the teasing over the years, she somehow lives up to the expectations. She's absolutely amazing. She's a little cold, keeping a distance. Peter even notes on her sounding like she doesn't care about a date getting cancelled. When the news inform of Rhino's rampage, she gets annoyed because that news broadcast stopped her music. Like, imagine if a news broadcast interrupted your gaming session to inform you of a shooter nearby, and your friend got annoyed about it. It's selfish and it's distant. To a degree, it's a little like Peter used to be. She's not just a cool girl. She's not just good. She's already has flaws. She's MJ's absolutely amazing here. I love her. Ditko era was made by Jameson and May, but it was also sabotaged by Betty and Liz. The new cast, is light years ahead of the previous one. I love the new cast. Like I said, like MJ absolutely rocks. I love this woman. But it's not just her. Flash is now written notably softer. He's nowhere near as aggressive as he used to be, making all the fun the banter between Flash and Peter and their dynamic of brawn versus brains a little bit more endearing. Gwen's more likable, even with all her misunderstanding. Like, I feel like I'm misogynistic for saying it, but she smiles more. She's drawn less standoffish. Like, it's just the way she poses and is. It's just she even thinks more kindly about Peter. She's just more inviting and friendly, and I think it works well for the character. The development with Harry has been supernatural. Like, Harry found out about Peter losing his parents, and since Harry lost his mom when he was young, and he's had a difficult time with his dad, they kind of connect over that, and it's a very genuine scene where it's like Harry tells Peter off, and Peter is like, "Hey, cool, I get it," and it's such a well handled. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's just perfect amount. And the next time we see them, they have a little bit more of a reaction. Harry defends Peter a little bit. Then after that, they start having conversations, like real conversations, as they understand each other a little bit more. We've gotten even glimpses to Harry's personal life, with his dad, with his father giving him an actual reason. We've gotten glimpses to Harry's personal life. Like, we've seen scenes without Peter that do not connect to Peter, at least directly. And it's like, those scenes give us an actual reason to care about the character outside of his relationship with Peter. I've said it before, the people are what makes Spider-Man work as a book. And when the supporting cast works, the book works. And it really works here. I love this cast. Like, this is so good compared to what it was before. It's absolutely nuts. I noticed something super cute in this book. Aunt May doesn't know Peter Parker is Spider-Man, right? She thinks Peter is fragile and weak. And you know what? He used to be fragile and weak. Like, he genuinely was. He was selfish and bitter and kinda... Peter used to be a bit of a beta male, like, how could you ever assume someone like that turned into an absolute giga chat? Aunt May genuinely knows Peter inside and out. And Aunt May thinks MJ is perfect for Peter, which will end up, of course, over time being proven true. It's honestly good writing. The old lady still thinks Peter as a child, because that's what parents tend to do, of course. And she can figure out the perfect match for Peter because of that. Like, she knows. Like, the only part that she cannot know, you could almost think that, she doesn't understand Peter. But it's like, no. Like, there's no way she could know about the Spider-Man stuff. Like, it's unfair to expect that kind of change from Peter. This is one thing she gets absolutely right. And, I don't know. I find that to be compelling writing. It's fitting that Aunt May gets it right. Fun fact, this might be the first time Spidey does this with his mask. Like, I'm not sure, there's enough issues by this point that I don't remember a lot of this stuff, these kind of details, but, I can't think of a previous time he's done this specific thing. He does it a lot in this run, where it's like the mask specifically muffles up his voice, so he changes his voice using it, or he has to change his voice to either Spider-Man or Peter Parker voice. It's, I don't think that was a thing before. I might be wrong, but I will point it out here because this is where it stood out to me. Shocker makes his first appearance in issue 46, and I have two things I have to mention. One, Shocker is actually kind of smart here. The guy builds his shock gloves in prison, all by himself. My man manages to build revolutionary technology in secret while under heavy surveillance. I always thought this guy is supposed to be a moron, or like kind of a regular, kind of a dumb guy, but it's like, no, this guy is smart. Like, what the hell? I'm so shocked by that. And 2, Shocker and Spider-Man fight in a bank, and that bank looks almost exactly like Insomniac Spider-Man. And, I think some other adaptation also did the bank fight with Shocker, but I can't remember which one. But anyway, this issue is why Shocker hangs out in banks. That's cool. Ditko's issues were all disconnected from each other. Like, there were some small connections here and there, and there were some multi-part stories, but his run was largely an anthology series. Like, you can skip a lot of issues. Like, the only ones you really need to read is maybe first appearances if you really wanna, or like the really good storylines, of course, and I don't know, Spidey Strikes Back trilogy and Annual, and If This Be My Destiny. Everything else, really, like, you can read if you want, or you can skip it without too many worries. Romita, though, very much leans heavily into the connections between issues. He will tease future villains, like here in issue 42. Connors appears in the issue, and he talks about being the Lizard again, and Spider-Man even comments on how dangerous Lizard is. And then, boom! Next issue, the Lizard crawls again. The Rhino wakes up in issue 41, so in the next issue, the first time we see him, he's already running loose without really any explanations, because the explanation was in the previous issue. The last few issues bring back Peter's emo shtick. Like I said before, that he gets super excited and super confident and it's awesome. Yeah, well, he becomes depressed again over the last few issues, and he kind of goes back to complaining about being a Spider-Man. He wants life, but Spider-Man keeps coming in the way. He wants to see Gwen, but MJ gets in the way. He wants to see MJ, but Spider-Man gets in the way. He wants to study, but there is Spider-Man stuff that needs to be done. Peter Parker struggles, so Spider-Man can exist. This is all This is all building up to one of the most famous stories in the character's history that I believe will happen next year. Like, I'm not exactly sure of the numbering, but I'm pretty sure it's next year. It's nice to see the build up to future storylines and villains, even though I'm getting a little tired of the quitting thing. Like, you already quit multiple times. Stop it! Steve Ditko's run was good. It's a little dated in the earlier storylines, but by the time the run finishes, it had become timeless. Ditko was incredible, and following up on someone like that should be an impossible task, and yet, John Romita Sr. is able to live up to Ditko's legacy. Romita takes Spider-Man and owns the character. He gives it his own style and voice without losing what made the book successful in the first place. To be able to stand next to someone like Ditko with your own style and your own voice and make the book as good, if not better, is an achievement. I think Romita was able to do the impossible, and for that, what else could you call John Romita Sr. but legendary?